To order of the Transportation Commission. It is Wednesday, April 7th. It is 4:02 p.m. and I will do a quick roll call here. Bob Kuhn.
Here.
Welcome, Bob.
Hey, welcome.
Ryan Burton. Derek Spice. Okay. Kate Morley.
Present.
Kevin Parks.
Present. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. And Nick Kraft.
Present.
Excellent. Well, thank you, commissioners, for being here on this beautiful afternoon. We do have a quorum, so we can move forward. Commission members non-voting. Well, we'll get to that in a moment. But first, I'd like to ask, are there any proposed changes from my fellow commissioners to the agenda before I move into general business? Item 1 in public comment. All right, hearing none, then move into item 1, general business, public comment. At this time, I would like to invite any member of the public to address the commission for any subject that is within our jurisdiction and that is not on the meeting agenda for tonight. Open meeting law prohibits us from discussing or taking action on an item that is not on the agenda. However, we may respond to criticism by those addressing us and ask staff to review a matter or ask that a matter be placed on a future agenda. To address the commission, to address us on an item that is not on the agenda, I invite you up at this time. Do we have any members of the public to address the commission?
This is Jim McCarthy. I just might note that I'm at the meeting.
Thank you. Welcome, Counselor.
Thank you. It took me a while to get in, computer problems.
Well, I'm glad you made it. All right. Any other members of the public? Okay. Hearing none, then I would like to go to this next item, welcoming the new City Police Department member. And I see that we have Lieutenant Charles Hernandez.
Yes.
Welcome.
Oh, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Trying to figure out how to do the video on this, but I can't figure it out yet. I'm on my mobile device, sorry. So I couldn't get my Teams app on my computer open, so.
Well, thank you for joining us. Will you be joining us at commissions from this point? Commission meetings?
I am Frank Higgins promoted to Deputy Chief. So I assumed his roles as a patrol lieutenant.
Excellent. All right.
Congratulations.
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
Lieutenant Hernandez.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, moving to the next item, which is approval of minutes. We do not have minutes ready for approval. So we will move on to item 2 of the agenda, new business. So at this time, I would like to welcome Jeff Malbeck, and perhaps Dave Wessel is here as well. And I invited Jeff and Dave to this afternoon's commission meeting to present about MetroPlan, to present on MetroPlan, goals, vision, and we haven't, it's been a little while, and I didn't know if everyone had gotten the background on what MetroPlan is working on since they formed MetroPlan after FMPO. So with that, thank you so much for being here this afternoon, and I am going to turn it over to you, Jeff. I'm going to turn off my camera and let you give us an update and tell us all about MetroPlan. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Chair Lead and members of the commission. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. And it has been a while since I've presented. And I have a lot to share. And we basically, the Flagstaff Metropolitan Planning Organization, which has been in existence for 24 years now, has a new identity. And that new identity is MetroPlan. And our mission is to create the finest transportation system in the country. So we set the bar very high, and also established that's our vision. And we established a mission of leveraging partnerships to maximize financial and political leverage to actually build that system. And it's difficult for a lot of people, certainly anybody outside of the inner workings of local government, and frankly, sometimes for people inside the inner workings of local government, to understand what metropolitan planning organizations are. They're a very interesting construct, and you might not know, there's 140 of them around the country. So we have a new identity, and I'd like to tell you about 2 projects and then share with you a video, 3 minutes long, that we just put together. The world premiere of this video is today at our strategic advance, and a couple of people in the room, Councilmember McCarthy and I believe Jeff Bowman and Kate Morley, actually were at that advance this morning. But for the rest of you, this is very new. And the intention of the 3-minute video is to be able to convey in a pretty concise and visual way what it is metropolitan planning organizations do, why we exist, how we all work together. So before I ask, and I think Julie or Jeff to put that up on the screen, because I want to make sure you have audio, and I don't use Team as often. Before that, I just want to point out 2 things that Julie, lead chair, asked me to share today. And the first is a major project for any metropolitan planning organization is to do a regional transportation plan. So we work to do a 25-year plan where we look well out into the future of where our community is going and what the needs are for transportation. And some of you may recall that when we did this process 4 years ago, it set off the first of many steps, and those steps led to propositions 419 and 420 and 421 being sent to voters. And in 2018, propositions 419 and 420 passed. So proposition 419 is a comprehensive transportation project initiative. And then 420 was for the Lone Tree Railroad overpass. So those things have been approved. And as we look to build the plan forward from here, we now have those as base kinds of items that we're going to project forward on. Whereas 5 years ago, they didn't exist. They were things that we were shooting for. So as we start this next regional transportation plan, where we're at today and we look forward, we're going to be taking into account the changes that have happened, and looking to what we want to do in the future. One of the changes I want to point out that many of you are aware of has to do with sustainability. There's much more interest and commitment to sustainability now than there was 5 years ago. So as we look at our next 25-year plan, we need to incorporate that in a much more inclusive way. The other item that Chair Lead asked me to share has to do with grants. And as you'll see from the video that's about to go up, MetroPlan does play an active role in trying to bring additional federal resources to this community. I want to recognize Mountain Line, and I see at least Kate is here from Mountain Line. Mountain Line secured a $5.5 million grant that's going to be used for bicycle and pedestrian funding in the city of Flagstaff. And the match for that grant is going to be provided by the city of Flagstaff. So it's a great partnership where both Mountain Line and the city said, let's work together and get new funding into this community. And frankly, they knocked it out of the park with a $5 million grant awarded. So that's one. And then another that's very alive right now that council, I think, discussed just last night, actually, and the MetroPlan board took action on just last week, has to do with the Lone Tree Corridor. And essentially, and this is a really big number, and we're starting really big, the number is $46.9 million. And the idea is to start to pursue this amount through the next reauthorization of the surface transportation bill, $46.9 million for the Lone Tree Corridor. And that would essentially bring additional money to this community to work on that project so that our limited local dollars can be stretched farther. So those are two items. And I wonder, Chair, would you like to show the video now, or would you like to see if there's questions from the commission?
I think we should do the video. Jeff Bauman, do you have that ready to go, or would you like me to load that?
If you have it loaded, that would be great. I'm sorry, I've been in meetings all day straight, so I didn't know I got something to load. So if you're ready, that would be great.
That is okay. Just one moment. All right. Commissioners, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Yes.
MetroPlan is the metropolitan planning organization for the greater Flagstaff region, with the mission to create the finest transportation system in the country.
We lost the
After World
screen.
War II, the country identified the need for a modern interstate highway system.
You lost video, is that what I heard?
Yeah, we lost the video.
It's because I maximized it. I won't maximize it.
To create the finest transportation system in the country. After World War II, the country identified the need for a modern interstate highway system. This effort didn't always align with the wishes of the cities and towns. The solution was the creation of metropolitan planning organizations, or MPOs, to provide local control to this federal effort. As the MPO for the greater Flagstaff area, MetroPlan is responsible for ensuring that transportation projects like roads and bridges, trails, bike lanes, and bus routes are thoughtfully planned and coordinated in ways that meet the needs of our community. Planning integrity is the engine that drives the work MetroPlan does. We listen to the public, research and apply best practices, and coordinate with our partner agencies to enhance their ability to deliver transportation improvements. Working across jurisdictional boundaries, we facilitate collaboration amongst governmental agencies to leverage resources and advance projects with one consolidated regional voice. Put simply, we find the synergy where the whole becomes greater than the sum of its parts. Guiding this process is a comprehensive 25-year plan which MetroPlan creates and updates regularly. This keeps us focused on our long-term vision and makes the case for the federal funding needed to get local projects done. Applying the 25-year plan with integrity and a view to the future allows MetroPlan to know when to say yes to one project and no or not yet to another. For example, in the realignment of West University Avenue and Milton Road, stakeholders all realized the mutual benefit in creating an underpass for pedestrian traffic as part of this project. This idea is moving forward. On the other hand, in searching for solutions to automobile traffic congestion on Humphrey Street, The widening of Humphreys from 2 lanes to 4 was studied. However, the expense, impact to community values, and opposition resulted in this idea being rejected. Setting high expectations requires setting high standards for ensuring maximum impact on as many residents as possible in a world and community that are ever changing. That's why MetroPlan supports challenging the status quo with technical planning integrity and clear-minded social trends, which allows for innovation while being prudent with taxpayer dollars. Creating the finest transportation system in the country will take everyone working together with agility and transparency to produce credible solutions for ambitious goals. MetroPlan welcomes you on this journey.
So thank you for sharing that. And, I think the video conveys the spirit of partnership and the way we, as MetroPlan, want to work together with everyone to try to bring additional resources to this community, and why we do it. And it's something we can share more broadly and even beyond the Transportation Commission. And with that, Madam Chair, I turn it back to you.
Thank you so much. I would ask, are there any members of the public here that have a question about the presentation that they would like to ask now? Otherwise, I want to turn it over to commissioners. Okay. Don't see any. Commissioners, do you have questions? Let's see. I do have a member of the public here that has a question for you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Please, can you please introduce yourself?
Yep, my name is Bill Babb, and I live at 4935 East Mount Pleasant Drive. And we just got on this late because we couldn't get in. But I guess we got a comment on the road that we live on here. We have no sidewalks out here at Continental on the Lake Lane side. And so we've got people walking in the street, and we've got a lot of fast cars going up and down the street. We actually had a lady and her dog run over and killed here 10 years ago. So the problem is...
Excuse me, Mr. Babb. So
Yes.
we have public comments at the beginning of the meeting. That public comment for items that are not on the agenda has already closed. Right now, we're talking specifically about an item on the agenda.
Okay. Yeah, we got in late. We couldn't get in, so that was part of the problem.
I apologize for
Sure.
that.
So
I
we're
understand
out.
your desire to address the commission, but if you would please let us finish this agenda item. And given the technical difficulty that you had for the public comment, I would be willing to, if my other commissioners support that, would be willing to open that back up, given the technical challenges here. But if you would please give me a moment. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Babb. All right, commissioners, do you have questions for Mr. Malbach about MetroPlan and all the great things that they're doing?
Yeah, I do. So I even had my hand up, Julie.
Oh, thank you. Commissioner
Jeff, great job on that little thing. What's the time frame on Lone Tree? Do you know on the what's the grant proposal and bringing in the money?
Sure. Thank you for the question. It's definitely a long-term process. The first step is we're trying to get a $46.9 million authorization, which is not money. It's just a line in this huge transportation bill. And once we get that authorization, we would look for future appropriations bills that actually attach money to it and where we apply for specific grants. My prediction is the absolute soonest it could happen would be within 15 months. I think it's easily going to be more like 24 to 36 months before we would see actual funding awarded.
Thanks.
I also have a hand up. I wonder if you can explain how your organization fits in with the city, because it seems like you're talking about funding and overseeing what I would consider a city project. And how do you fit in, you know, with that organization, and who's in charge, so to speak?
The city's in charge. Let me just
Okay.
answer it that way to start. And I think that's really important. The purpose of the video is to spell out how MetroPlan is really a collective of 5 local governments, and MetroPlan works to serve all of those local governments with projects that we share. As it happens, the Lone Tree Corridor is a project that benefits the city, the county, the university, the community college. It's a very widely supported project. So although the city has done their part and gone out and received local funding, and as you know, you chaired the Citizen Commission a few years ago, the city did a lot of work with the community to get funding for that locally. Well, now MetroPlan's in a position to say, well, maybe we can help too. So we'll do what we can, getting people together to go pursue additional funding and bring it in to leverage that local taxpayer dollar. So it's a supportive role. And clearly, I mean, to be very clear, MetroPlan is not going to be building a construction project. We do planning and we work to attract funding and try to move things forward with a vision and a direction. Does that answer it?
Yeah, I guess I'm just still absorbing the video too. So it's like those 5 organizations within the town form this body, and then you have the ability to assist at times by seeking funding or authorizations or what have you. But yeah, I'm still grasping it, I think. And I'll keep after it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other commissioners? Okay. So I have a couple of questions for you. The first one is, what can we do to help and support MetroPlan, and specifically this, the $46.9 million endeavor for the Lone Tree Corridor? Is there a role that the Transportation Commission can play in that effort that would provide support in the pursuit?
Well, thank you for the question. And first of all, I think certainly a letter to Arizona congressional delegation from the Transportation Commission would be great. We're collecting letters right now from the city, the county, the university, the school district. And if you could provide one, that would be helpful. And I can send you some draft language if you'd like.
Yes, that would be greatly appreciated. And that is something that we can definitely work on. What is the deadline?
I'll send you the language. It'd be great to get back next week. The deadline that I understand the deadline is April 14th.
It is a tremendous opportunity. This has been in the RTP and studied for a long time, the Lone Tree Corridor, and with the investment of the Lone Tree Overpass being made and moving forward, this is a fantastic way to potentially complete a project that's much needed in our community. So my other question for you, you had said, talked about sustainability related to the RTP and this update that you're starting on for the next 25 years. And I'm curious, with the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, what parts of sustainability will you be talking about or will be looked at as part of the RTP? How is that being injected into that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there are really 2 parts to the answer. The first part is we're going to do a scenario which is the current land use scenario. And we look at existing funding sources for approved projects and where things need to happen, and we project those out 25 years. One of the things we're going to project out is this seeming renewed interest in sustainability. And that means looking at things like Proposition 419 that has specific projects identified to see where there might be some adjustments made to do more for sustainability, maybe for bike and pedestrian funding or other programs. And, we've had a lot of meetings on this recently, and I need to be really clear, and a couple of very important caveats. A, these propositions were approved by voters, and changes are definitely limited. And then B, the people who determine the limits on those changes, well, that's the city of Flagstaff. That's the city attorney's office. It's not MetroPlan. So I'm trying to put out some real clear guardrails, recognizing there's been a shift in interest in the community. And so what can we do? And that's scenario one. That's the most basic answer to your question. However, there's more, because we're going to take it to the next level and do a scenario two. And scenario two in the regional transportation plan is not going to be fiscally constrained. Scenario two is going to say, you know what, if we just put on our thinking caps and got creative and we wanted to go from here and build a new system, what might that look like? And that's a very bold thought exercise. And one of the things MetroPlan offers is, a forum to have that discussion, and we can lay out some steps. And then if the community decides they want to pick up some of those steps and move forward with them, they can. We will have provided somewhat of a map. Again, I want to be clear, it's going to be an ambitious and difficult map. It's not going to be easy terrain, I don't think, because we're talking about significant shifts. And it's a starting point. And I think our board, our organization feels like, to be responsive to the community and where we're at today, we really need to start to engage this discussion and line out a different future to see if people want to pursue it.
Thank you. Hey, commissioners, any other questions for Mr. Melbeck or MetroPlan? All right. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for taking the time this afternoon and being here. It's exciting, and I will be coordinating with Jeff Bauman and the commission about that letter. That's something we can get going and get out the door in the next week, because that's a fantastic opportunity. So
thank you, and I'll sign off now, and I'm going to get to my email, and I will get you that information before 5 o'clock today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye. So commissioners, we had a member of the public that was having the technical difficulty and wasn't able to get logged on when we had public comment. Is there any objection if I reopen public comment for a 3-minute address to the commission for that item before moving to our next agenda item?
I have no problem. I just think we ought to vote on it as amended agenda. That's all.
We need to? Okay.
We need to, yeah.
Okay. All right, then is there a motion?
A motion that we allow public comments now with the change of the agenda.
Okay. And a second?
Second, Kevin.
Thank you. Any discussion? All right. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Okay. Thank you. So, Mr. Babb, we are now opening up public comments. You have 3 minutes to address the commission about an item that's not on tonight's agenda. And we will not discuss the item. If we have a question for you, we'll ask it. But since it's not on the agenda, it's not open for discussion. However, we do have an opportunity to ask staff to look into it or place it on the agenda for a future commission meeting. So with that, Mr. Babb, please.
Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, this is Jill and Bill Babb. We're both
Okay.
On this call, and we live on Mount Pleasant. And thank you so much for letting us at least voice our opinion, and of course, especially because we were late, and letting us do it now. So thank you. We were under the assumption that there was going to be something on the agenda talking about the street that we live on, Mount Pleasant. That is right by Lakey Lane off of Butler. We have had speeding issues. We've had this house here for 23 years, and we finally put a sign in our front that says, please slow down. But there is no stop sign or yield signs on our road at all. And we've had a lady 10 years ago and her dog killed at the end of our street because she came around a parked car and they didn't see her and they were going too fast. We have a lot of building going on out here. We have all these subcontractors that are always speeding. I go out there and I'm always yelling at them. And so anyway, I'm getting tired of that. And I'm sure they're getting tired of hearing me. So I'm just wondering, how do we go about trying to get some sort of stop sign on what was the name of the road?
Green Mountain.
Green Mountain and Mount Pleasant, which we think would slow down the traffic immensely. What do we do I mean, do we just get on the agenda, or how do we go about this?
Jeff Bauman, is that something that you would like to address?
Sure.
Thanks.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, we talked Mount Pleasant at our last meeting, and Mount Pleasant is on the list of locations to measure some speeds and volumes. And those studies are probably a week or two away now that the weather has turned for us quickly. Actually, we were plowing snow a week and a half ago, and now it's looking great out there for doing studies. So Mount Pleasant is on the list. And if everything goes as it should, then I would expect Mount Pleasant will be on the agenda at our next meeting, which is, I think, June 2nd.
Okay, good. Well,
that's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening. And with that, I think I'll close public comment. And we will move on to item 2B of our agenda. So this is, again, Greater Flagstaff MetroPlan. This is our regional ITS, Intelligent Transportation System Strategy, part of the public outreach. Looks like we have Mr. Wessel joining us from San Francisco today. Again, this is another informational item. No action is required. So with that, I will turn it over to you. Dave, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. I appreciate you having me here tonight. I'm going to present on intelligent transportation systems and the strategy that we're working to put together. I've got a brief presentation for you, and I will share my screen. Are you able to see the presentation?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. So are you seeing the presentation, or are you seeing my notes?
Both.
Okay, let's just do it this way. So the impetus for this putting this strategy together really came about from a grant opportunity that the city would like to pursue using Proposition 419 funds, a topic we've already discussed. And really the strategy is to help us identify and prioritize those investments that we want to make in transportation technology. So what I'm going to present to you tonight is a little bit on ITS, some of the technologies that are out there that we might think about planning for and deploying. A little overview of the strategy, where we stand on the tasks that we're making progress on. Show you the mission, vision, and goals that we've drafted thus far, and I'll give you some background on how we've got there, and then next steps. So with that, what is ITS? It's basically using these innovative services for the different modes to make them operate smarter and better. And any project that moves us in that direction is an ITS project. So ITS is supported locally and at the statewide level. There's a document called the ITS architecture, which identifies a wide array of technologies and packages and that the different organizations and entities are interested in pursuing, and has some outline and overview for how those might look. Locally, we have the Regional Transportation Plan, as Jeff Milbeck just mentioned. We're in the process of updating that. But in that current plan, we recognize that ITS is, it's not all robots making things happen for us. It does require an investment in human capital to make sure that those daily operations and maintenance of that equipment is happening. And it also requires robust and redundant communications capabilities. So there's been a lot of conversation in the community recently about broadband and making sure we get fiber to carry these immense amounts of data, a lot of which involves video, for instance. And then there's a city council goal, and I think this might be dated, but still something very much on top of mind for the current council. And this is really getting this broadband and what it brings to the community, including smart traffic management, managing multimodal transportation, and alternative energy opportunities. So with that background, here's the type of technologies that ITS and this grant in particular supports, and we are shamelessly organizing this strategy around these technology groups to better position ourselves for this grant application. So smart signals, better detection of vehicles, pedestrians, and other users, better prediction and coordination. Transit, everything from automated vehicle locators to people counters and transit signal priority. Safety, this component really focuses on the emerging connected and automated vehicles and the Internet of Things, so connecting vehicles to signals, for instance. Information, things for route planning, those dynamic message signs you see with the fun safety messages, but also things like alerting you to traffic accidents or, I'm sorry, it's not accidents, it's crashes. So crashes that are ahead or the time to arrive to a different destination. It supports smart grid, and this is really about charging station and foreseeing the coming of the electrification of the fleet and making sure that there's places for them to charge. Electronic pricing, everything from tolls to congestion pricing to mobile pay, so you can use an app on your phone to maybe buy your bus ticket. Data, of course, is a big part of this, and detection and taking that detection and turning it into collection, bringing it in for analysis. Big data. I don't know if Jeff and his staff have presented any of our streetlight data and the access they have to it. And the streetlight data is the company, not the infrastructure, that uses cell phones to collect data. It's great for origin destination, speed studies, and other things. How do we use technology to improve maintenance? How do we monitor conditions on the road for either snow plowing or sweeping or even detecting potholes? How do we use it to improve our routing so we can get those services done more efficiently? How do we use it for scheduling maintenance activities? And then the last one is mobility. And this is really about services for the elderly and disabled, and how can we use technology to improve mobility for those groups. So as we consider all of these technologies that are available and how we would integrate them regionally, we're looking to put together a plan that will be adopted by MetroPlan and targeting this May and June. Part of this reason for having it adopted by MetroPlan is we can have a better chance of meeting the schedule in advance of the grant application, which is anticipated to be due at the end of August. We're producing this in-house with a lot of help from our partners. And as I mentioned, we're organizing it around this alphabet soup of a grant and the eligible technologies there. That's the Advanced Transportation and Congestion Management Technology Deployment Grant, sometimes called alphabet soup, sometimes called tech deployment. So what are we putting into this strategy? A lot of literature review. As you can imagine from that previous slide, there are a lot of technologies and a lot to learn about them. We're leaning on the statewide ITS architecture and the expertise of a lot of my colleagues, including Jeff Bauman and city staff. So we hope to produce strategies for the deployment and priorities amongst those strategies, associating those with the costs of implementation, the benefits that we would expect to receive, like travel time savings, reduced accidents or crashes, fatalities, and injuries, better on-time performance for transit. And then, as mentioned out of the RTP, not losing sight of operations and maintenance, and making sure we get the cost and staffing associated with those to the best of our ability. And if we can, we want to identify who's providing this. Obviously, the city and ADOT are going to be key players, Mountain Line as well, but there may be a role for private sector. We mentioned traveler information. Well, we're all familiar with Google Maps. It is possible to partner with a group like Waze or another group called Move It and really customize those type of trip planning apps for a local community. So there could be a private and public-private partnerships there. So where do we stand? We're almost done with our mission, vision, and goals. And we'll review some of those here soon. I showed you some of that policy support. We've dug through those documents, and that's coming along well. The background descriptions, again, we're leaning heavily on the grant language to describe those, but also doing some literature review, and that's coming along well. I want to give a shout out. She's not on the line, but Brianna Fimbres is our Montoya Fellow. She works with us and with Mountain Line. Done a lot of good work, including digging into ADOT's vaults to get unit costs for some of the technology we might deploy. Public involvement, we're looking to go out with a short survey on the mission, vision, and goals, just to get some reaction there. And we'll go back out for some weighting criteria in terms of what's important. I'll hit on data gathering a little bit more, and then we're just starting to move into the performance metrics and priorities as we speak. In terms of data gathering, we've got a lot of support from all the agencies in putting together an inventory. We just kind of need to make it a little more organized and uniform. We'll rely on the MetroPlan regional model for a lot of traffic, bike, pedestrian, and transit data. We'll get a lot of actual transit data from Mountain Line, and then look to the Arizona Crash Information System for that data as well. And so we'll, in the next couple weeks, be actively pulling that data and having conversations with our stakeholders as to the best means of analysis. And we're sure there's other data needs as well that will be identified as we move forward. So before we talk about the mission, vision, and goals, we put together a problem statement to try to encapsulate what we're after. And as I mentioned, we're experiencing some inefficiencies due to congestion. We're seeing fatalities and injuries that are maybe preventable, and technology can help us do that. Maybe limits to mode choices, maybe the way our signals operate, or information available to people to make decisions. Jeff mentioned sustainability as a focus of our regional transportation plan, and certainly a focus of the city. Transportation is 40% of that. We want to try to reduce that, and perhaps technology through reducing of idling and maybe balancing across modes can help us. And frankly, we're kind of falling a little bit behind the times. Some of that is the speed that technology is changing. Some of that is staffing shortages. but there's a lot to tap into that we simply aren't, and we really haven't coordinated across agencies as much as we can. And why are we doing it at all? To improve efficiency, travel, for safety and performance, for quality of life. So that's a real high level problem statement. Obviously, it's much more complex than you can capture in a paragraph, but thought that kind of captured it. So here's our mission and vision. And let me, I'm going to go ahead and take the opportunity to blow this up for you because that wasn't very big. So our mission is to use transportation technology to improve efficiency, the environment, and safety for everyone. And our vision in this is that the greater Flagstaff region is nationally recognized for its excellence in the cooperative deployment of successful advanced transportation technologies. So the vision is where we want to be. We're asserting it as something that we can achieve, and the mission is how we're going to get there. In arriving at this mission and vision statement, we've had interviews with more than 30 of our colleagues and stakeholders across a wide array of specialties, and we've had a couple of larger group meetings to pull these together. As far as the goals, we have 4 of them, and the bullets are kind of truncated to make them easier to view. So, data utilization, we just need to do a better job of it. There's a lot of it available, a lot of it coming in. We want to make sure that we're working in a coordinated fashion, that we're making sure that data is of high quality to support decision making, staying on top of best practices, and in kind of a relatively new development, look at data equity. Maybe you're familiar with the phrase, you manage what you measure, and that management also often comes with, the measurement often comes with the data. Well, is that data that you're gathering really taking as broad a perspective as you need to treat everyone in the community equitably? So that's part of the data utilization goal. Next goal is efficiency. We have these bottlenecks. MetroPlan is really looking to help identify the technologies that'll help improve system and intermodal efficiency. Part of that is to try to get balance across modes. We think information and technology can help with decision making. A lot of hardware is needed for communications, fiber optics, and detection. And this can help with signal phasing. And again, that can be associated with multiple modes. Coordination across regional agencies. Jeff does his job, and he does it well, and he has his conversations with ADOT on terms of how signals may operate. But as we move into this realm of higher technology, and we're talking about how do you coordinate communications across fiber? Are there times of day when our different jurisdictional roads will take different priorities? This really needs a higher level of communication and more formal structure. And then how do we monitor system conditions for better maintenance? The next goal has to do with sustainability and inequity. As we mentioned, we have this carbon neutrality goal by 2030. We also know that alternate modes, transit, ped, and bike, are used by many lower income people. And so we want to make sure that we're helping to achieve equity and sustainability. So how can we use technologies to reduce emissions? Part of that is to achieve mode shift. Part of that is to improve traffic flow and reduce idling. Looking at equitable service to underserved communities, educating the public, and how do we use technology to get information out to the public about what their travel choices might mean. I mean, that could be even, just promoting things like Fitbits, if you will, to say, hey, you can walk and improve your health at the same time. Trip planning, there's some discussion on that at our meeting today. You know, whether it's Google Maps or Waze or Move It or some other application, are there ways to make trip planning a little more convenient and informative? And then this idea of the electrification of the fleet and supporting it through vehicle charging. The last goal is safety and security. We want to reduce fatalities and injuries, particularly amongst the most vulnerable users like peds and bikes. There's opportunities through things like crowdsourcing to more quickly alert emergency responders to crashes and their severity. Similarly, alerting drivers to crash locations, which can help reduce secondary crashes. As we learn more about where risks are, we can perhaps use technology to predict those situations and either adjust signals to help reduce the risk, or even in some instances, it's like, oh, well, we know this time of day, this signal becomes problematic, and you actually stage emergency response closer to this safety location, and that can be life-saving. And then we want to make sure we don't lose track of cyber security. I don't know how many of you saw when automated vehicles first started coming out, the hack that took place is, you know, just a test is one car is driving next to the other, and a guy hacked into his automated vehicle and drove him off the road. It was a controlled experiment, but it's like, okay, we can't have that happening in mass. So let's make sure we stay on top of cybersecurity. So our what's coming up next? This is my last slide, and I'll be happy to take any questions and maybe get some response to some of the work we've done. We are trying to organize around these technology groups to really start putting together our performance metrics, identify the data we need and the analyses that we need to do. I say through April 10th, but it'll probably take place through obviously will take place through the end of the month. And we really want to have those wrapped up by the end of the month or early May. We're hoping to have adoption by our technical advisory committee in May and the executive board in June. As I mentioned, the grant is anticipated to be due at the end of August. And hopefully we can pull a lot of stuff straight from this strategy into that grant application. But that concludes my presentation, and I am happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you. Commissioner, questions? Questions or comments? Commissioner Kraft.
Howdy.
Howdy.
How are you?
I'm good. It's good to see you again.
Good. Does this project connect to what was talked about as part of the citizens tax program? It seemed like there was a technological element in there.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up, Commissioner Kraft. That's an excellent point. So in the tax and in the information that went to the public, there's roughly $3.5 million identified for advanced traffic management systems or smart signals. And I want to commend Jeff and the city staff for working to advance those funds so they can be used as match in this grant. Otherwise, they would have been spread out over the full 20 years of the grant and dribs and drabs. So here we can really, if we're successful, leverage as much as $3.5 million. And if we can bring other partners into the fold in a timely manner, we may be able to leverage more. But thank you for the question.
Certainly. And then when you do a project like this, you're planning it, but who enacts it? Who actually carries it out?
Well, I'll give you the same answer that Jeff Milebeck did earlier. We'll plan it and we'll hand it off to the appropriate agencies. So most likely the city of Flagstaff will be carrying the weight of this application or first phase of implementation. There is a possibility, though, that we may identify partial priorities on a state highway and get ADOT involved. And that's where intergovernmental agreements and other things will come into play. Okay.
Yeah, I was looking at your website. It looks like everybody's part of the planning anyway. So you're including everybody throughout the whole process. So it would make sense you would identify who's going to, who's going to own the equipment, who's going to have the employees that do the things and that type of thing along the way. So looks good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, other questions or comments? Okay. It's a big, ambitious endeavor, Dave. And it's pretty broad. Commissioner Morley has a comment in just a minute. I wonder, of all of the things that you're looking at, thinking about, talking about, studying, what are the items that are low-hanging fruit, essentially, that could be implemented quickly, easily, lower cost, that could really set the stage for ideas?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'll offer a little speculation, though we still have a lot of work to do. I think one of the easy ones is the one that Commissioner Kraft just brought up through the Tax Commission, and that's smart signals. ADOT's familiar with them. The city has deployed some on Butler, and so there's some familiarity with that technology, and we have the funding that can support it. I think a significant caveat for that technology, and a lot of them, is getting the fiber optics and other high volume communications capabilities in place. Some of the others that would be low-hanging fruit, we've had a couple interesting conversations, one with Move It, which is a trip planning app that's really broadly applied internationally. And we could work with them to get the city logo or region's logo on an app as people employ it, do geofencing and some other things that might help us target certain destinations or something, and really work with them to make sure that all of our modes are well represented and that the trip planning is as clean as possible. So I think that's an opportunity that's relatively inexpensive that could start small and grow into something significant. There's work to be done on coordination between agencies. There's been significant talk about transit signal priority. Mountain Lion is already investing in some of that technology. They have a grant for a technology upgrade. And there is a pilot project in the works at Caspar. And so as we work through this process, and I know Mountain Lion is also engaged in evaluating some of this, I think that's an opportunity, relatively inexpensive, to upgrade signals and put that in. So I think that's a great basis. As you can imagine, after looking at that list of all the 9 technology groups and all the different technologies underneath each of those, coordination of all of those efforts and all of those technologies, and making sure that they're working together towards the most effective means is going to be a big challenge of this effort and, you know, the ITS effort going forward.
All right, we've got Commissioner Mulkey and then Commissioner Kuhn.
Hi, I just wanted to thank Dave for his effort on this project. I even learned many things tonight that we can achieve through some ITS technology. Yeah, I think of specific importance are a lot of the things that we can do to help relieve congestion because, you know, as we're finding through the Milton Corridor study and others that we can't widen our way out of our congestion problems. I think that these solutions become even more important. So just wanted to say thanks for your effort, Dave.
Thank you.
Dave, how you doing?
I'm good. Commissioner Kuhn, how are you?
Good, good. What are you looking at with the advancement in the you know, electric vehicles and charging stations and the lack of them? How are you involved with that to get more? You know, obviously as they grow, we need to see growth in that.
That's a good question, and you know, we may. What was the famous phrase from a couple administrations ago? Lead from behind on this one. At our advance earlier today, we had a little poll for people in terms of an article about in 2040 what % of the fleet will be electric. The answer turned out to be 90%. Well, you know, we're not going to have a fleet of 90% electric vehicles without charging stations. And I just came across an article about, I think it's Rivian is the company. They've got an electric truck coming out. Yeah. They're going to put out, I don't know, I think it's like 10,000, 20,000 charging stations. You know, you can't hardly turn around without seeing a Tesla charging station. So we just might sit back and clap real loud for the efforts that are taking place. Meanwhile, you know, I know the city and the county have installed some charging stations and are looking at electrifying their fleet. And Mountain Lion has intents for the downtown connection center and their Casbar facility to look at electrification and put charging stations in there and move towards electric buses. So, gosh, what's FUSD doing to get on board this train?
Well, you know, when we're looking at them, they're just the expense right now is significant, and that's why I asked that. Yeah. You know, we've gone propane, which is significantly cleaner, but we need to advance with electric. So,
and we thank you for that effort. But we'll be looking at probably at a fairly high level in this strategy. You know, what scale of electrification we need, what type of electrification we need, and maybe identify some funding opportunities.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Councilmember McCarthy.
Yeah, just as a follow-up, I might mention that the city council just recently made a new building code change saying that garages shall have electrical hookups ready for, you know, charging vehicles. So all new construction will have that. And then when, like, for instance, last night we're going over a new apartment complex rezoning, and we have pushed the developer to put in some charging stations at the new apartments. So we're doing that too. So we're aware of this and doing what we can gradually. Thank you.
That's great news.
Commissioners, any other comments or questions? Okay. Any members of the public with comment or questions? All right. Well, Dave, thank you very much. Keep us posted in the next couple months of that draft. And if there is you know, support that you seek from the commission or reviewer input, please let us know. I think our next meeting is June 2nd, which doesn't quite fit with your schedule, but I guess that's a question for you. Is there anything from the commission that you seek?
That's great. And yes, I would love to send out the draft and share the draft with you. And of course, we need to make sure that that's done in a singular manner so we don't violate any open meeting laws. If any of you would care to comment, so we'll try to get the draft to you. I believe our executive board meeting is June 3rd. And if I were to present to you on June 2nd, if there was any feedback or endorsement that might give our board a little more confidence in adopting it. So I'd appreciate that opportunity. And just as a footnote, we may, have a conditional adoption or a partial adoption that says, yeah, here's our priorities, put those in the grant, come back to us with the rest of the document later, just so that we can meet our deadlines for the grant. So, but I do appreciate your time this evening, and thank you and city staff for hosting us tonight.
Thank you. Have a wonderful evening.
Yeah, enjoy the rest of your meeting. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
All right. With that, we will move on to item 2C, which is the City of Flagstaff Sustainability Section Carbon Neutrality Plan. I believe I saw Ms. Neiman join us earlier. And at this time, again, this is an informational item. No formal action is required. So I invite city staff to present the carbon neutrality plan.
Thank you so much, Chair Lead. And I'd like to share my screen if that's all right. And I will get that up here now. Everybody, it's great to see you. I am back again, and I truly appreciate the time of this commission to have this conversation again. So thank you very, very much for the invitation and allowance. I was here talking to y'all, I believe it was December, early December, talking about the climate emergency. We now have a draft plan, and so that's what I'm going to be talking about tonight. My name is Jenny Neiman. I am the Climate and Energy Specialist within our Sustainability section. So tonight I will go a little bit quickly. I know y'all have a very busy agenda. I also know you know a lot of this, so I'll go quickly. Please feel free to flag me down. I cannot see the chat, so I'll ask Chair Lead or Jeff if y'all want to flag me down. We also can do questions or discussions at the end too. But really here tonight, I'm here to introduce you to our draft plan and where we have gotten to. Following up on my last presentation, this is all work that's part of the climate emergency, and to get to carbon neutrality was what council set within the climate emergency declaration. They said we need to get to carbon neutrality by 2030. And so we have been working over the last 8 months to figure out just how to do that. I also want to get your feedback and see, are we on the right track? If there's not time for that tonight, which I understand, y'all can send it to me. We can keep talking. This plan is online. We have a lot of feedback opportunities. And then I'd also ask for your help in spreading the word. This is a really important plan. We want as many people to learn about it. And so we know that word of mouth is sometimes the best way that we get, things through our community, right? Y'all know a lot more folks than I do, right? And we've been going to commissions and groups, but we know that, y'all just talking to your neighbors is really, really important. So I'll just have you keep that in mind of what conversations maybe you can have as commissioners, because transportation is so important to this initiative. So just real fast, background, some climate action in Flagstaff. We've talked about this before, I believe, with this commission, but we just want to make sure everyone's on the same page. With climate change in Flagstaff, we're facing a number of things, but mainly we're going to get a little bit hotter and we're going to get a little bit drier. Those changes are small, but they have big impacts. And so we'll start to see more days within, the 90s in May and June, maybe July, we'll start to see less snowpack. What we think about a little bit more at the city and from the kind of city sustainability section perspective, as well as our partner divisions, is what does that mean for our community, for our infrastructure, for our housing systems, right? As the heat rises in Phoenix, what does that do to housing demand here in Flagstaff, right? How does that affect our economy in both the winter and the summer? How does that affect public health? So we're kind of thinking about the human systems that are kind of have cascading effects after those natural systems, where we'll see the first changes. We do really want to remember that not all people face the same threats from climate change. Maybe you are an older adult and you really struggle with asthma, or you really struggle on hot days. Maybe you live in a neighborhood that is more at risk of flooding. Maybe your race or ethnicity has impacted how you access services from the city. We know that people face climate change differently. We also know that our vulnerable communities will see the first and worst impacts from climate change. So we want to think about that through all of our actions. We think about 3 core types of actions for climate action. That's mitigation. So that's mostly what we're talking about today. Mitigation means to reduce our emissions, which is how we contribute to climate change. So reducing our impact. We also want to prepare for change. Climate change is here. We've already seen temperatures increase in northern Arizona, and we also have started to see more, shocks. And so we're going to have kind of long-term changes, let's say in our land use or our housing pressures. We're also going to have short-term shocks and disasters. How do we prepare for that change? And then finally, equity, as I talked about before. How do we think about the most vulnerable members of our community, and how do we help them to adapt? When we think about emissions, so that mitigation, y'all have probably seen me here before with a pie chart on this. We tried to simplify it. Our emissions are pretty similar to the rest of the country. They come mainly from powering our buildings, our transportation, so getting around town, and then what we consume, what I had for lunch today, and my laptop right here, right? What were the emissions that went into that, as well as emissions from waste, right? From our landfill. So those are kind of the tenets. I want to talk a little bit about climate action history. So the sustainability section was started in 2007. We've been working since then. We've had programs. We focus a lot on energy rebates and retrofit and resilience and solar. In 2018, our actions were formalized into a community-wide plan. So that was Flagstaff's first community-wide plan. It was the first in Arizona, and it really laid out, these are our goals for climate. When that plan was passed, the science community had just come out with some pretty dire predictions about how quickly we needed to move in order to avoid the worst effects of climate change. That was kind of passed came out the same month as our first climate plan. And so we said, we're going to pass this plan. We might have to have a conversation in the future. The community came to us and they said, the time for that conversation is now. We need to move much more quickly to avoid really catastrophic events and effects on mainly the world's poor. And we need to do our part as part of the international community. And so hundreds of community members came to City Council. It was one of the best days of my kind of local government life, just because they were so organized. There was a group of grandparents who were there to talk about why they were concerned about climate change, and local business owners and health professionals. And that picture is from that. And City Council was moved, and they adopted this climate emergency declaration in June of 2020. So this declaration has been the basis. It's what we talked about last time, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. But really the things to know are, it really calls for these huge shifts. We need a dramatic increase in our ambition and our mobilization to make the changes to achieve carbon neutrality. It set the goal of carbon neutrality by 2030, so in just 8 short years. And it really is helping us to set this framework for action. That framework for action is the carbon neutrality plan that will guide us for going forward. So, if this was citizen initiated, and this is the council direction, and so that's why we're moving forward, but it is really supported by the full spectrum of community members, businesses, leaders in our community, residents, other governments. So it's really a collaborative declaration, and so we want the carbon neutrality plan to be a really collaborative effort. I'm now going to get into the meat of the plan, and I'll tell you, this plan is available online. I will send out some links to it and how y'all can get involved. I will go quickly, but I just want to say, we will get through most of the meat of it actually tonight. this plan is not a rigid document that says we need to retrofit, 5,000 homes. This is exactly how we're going to do it. To be honest, we don't know exactly how we're going to do it. We know we need to do it though. And so this plan is really to get everybody really, really clear about where we're heading and what we're trying to do here. And so that's what I'll mostly be talking about tonight. And some people may say, well, we don't have a lot of details, and that's true. But we will be figuring it out as we go, and we'll be continuing to have this conversation with the community. We really do see this as a living document. So just to be really clear and get everybody on the same page, carbon neutrality, it means basically balancing out our emissions to get to zero emissions, kind of net zero emissions as a community. So first, we're going to reduce our emissions as much as possible. That means reducing our driving, right? And maybe you take a bike instead. You've just reduced your emissions for that one trip, and for the day and for yourself. Obviously, when we tally that up, we can get a lot more emissions reductions. We know that in 2030, there will still be emissions. There will still be plenty of gas and diesel cars on the road. There will still be plenty of homes running on natural gas. And so what we need to do then is we need to measure our remaining emissions. And then we actually need to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. That is how we get to neutrality. We think of it as this kind of scale, right, of what are our total emissions and how do we essentially neutralize those. That's where that carbon neutrality word comes from. Real quickly on the plan, we call it the CNP, the Carbon Neutrality Plan. It is that framework for action. It is a living document. We do think it's going to constantly evolve. Batteries are evolving every month, basically, right? Electrification. There's a new mobility device on the market. I saw something the other day. I have absolutely no idea what it is, but I'm sure that the guy got it like down the street at Walmart, right? There are new ways to get around our community every day. And so we need to be able to respond and be flexible to that. We do need bold action, and we do need to align our citywide decisions. You heard about this a lot before from Jeff and Dave tonight, right? About how are we looking at this through a sustainability lens or a carbon neutrality lens? How are we thinking about our policies across the board as the city, and how we're making decisions, and how does that impact our emissions? And then finally, this conversation, we've talked to some 1,900 community members. We are continuing to talk to folks over the next month as we finalize this plan. So our goals, mitigation is to achieve carbon neutrality. I'm going to get into our adaptation and our equity goals in a little bit, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. But this is important, and this kind of relates back to those three categories of emissions that I talked about before. On 2016, on the left side of this graph are our 2016 emissions, and the numbers don't really matter. This is the metric is how we measure emissions, how all cities measure emissions generally. And by 2029, we are going to reduce those emissions as much as we possibly can. This amount, 470,000 tons, is about as far as we think we can get. And so at that time, we will then need to use carbon dioxide removal to offset those emissions. So it's kind of an equivalent amount that we're going to use to do that. This reduction is a very big deal. It is, I think, a 44% reduction from our business as usual. So not from 2016, but from business as usual. It's going to take a lot to get there. It doesn't look like a lot. Some people will say you're nowhere close to zero. And that's true. But this is going to be a very big lift just to get that far. I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of the metrics that we need to get there. And so these are some of the outcomes that kind of back up that graph, if that makes sense. I kind of go into those numbers. So first is vehicle miles traveled. We need to hold them steady at 2019 levels. That is the proposal right now. That obviously has really big implications for all of the work that we've been talking about tonight. Normally we see VMT grow after year. How can we hold our VMT, our vehicles miles traveled? 30% of the miles we do travel by 2029 need to be in electric vehicles. That's also going to be difficult. The market is evolving every single day. I just saw Rivian, as you mentioned, Dave, there's a new Silverado that's coming out. We believe that Ford F-150 line will be electrified. We'll have electric options soon. It's coming, but it's slow. But we need a significant amount of our miles to be driven with electric vehicles to meet our emission goals. There's a lot of other numbers here about solar, about renewable electricity, both on commercial and industrial buildings, as well as homes, and retrofitting. I'm going to get into that, but I just wanted to kind of give you all a sense of kind of the numbers that we're talking about, they are very, very big numbers. Retrofitting 12,000 homes is going to take a lot. So the basics of our carbon neutrality plan, we have 4 main areas of action. They're around our neighborhoods, our energy sources, our consumption, and our commitment. I'm going to go through all of these. I'm going to spend a little bit more time on transportation, and I know I've got like 3 minutes left. So first, neighborhoods. This is where we get to decrease dependence on cars, energy sources, consumption, and then commitment. So now we're at neighborhoods. Equitable systems and resilience, I'm going to talk about just really briefly because they go throughout the plan. We need every one of our actions to be thinking about equity and resilience. And so first is in here is resilience. And so this is, again, kind of thinking about how we do a better job of adapting to change. So every change we want to make, we want to say, does this help our community members adapt to the changing future? There are a lot of ways to do that. Some are as simple as meeting your neighbors so that you can maybe help them if we have a power outage or if we have some really hot days. The next is equity, and again, not doing harm, but also making sure that we're doing good, making sure that everyone has access to our programming, and also that we're thinking about the impacts on our vulnerable community members. Finally, decreasing dependence on cars, why we're really here tonight. And so this is, we depend on cars in our country, right? We depend on cars in our state and in Flagstaff, our community. Some depend on cars more than others, right? And so what can we learn from those folks who are not depending on cars a lot? What can we learn also from those neighborhoods where folks don't depend on cars? This focus area is really about both transportation and land use. As I'm sure this commission knows well, they're so closely tied together. So this isn't just about bike lanes, but it's about making it so that our neighborhoods support more people biking, right? Not just the safe infrastructure, but we want to make it so that they want to bike. This is really, we talk about big shifts for this and transformation in the way that we think about transportation and make our decisions. We also talk about 15-minute neighborhoods. So do you live in a neighborhood where within a 15-minute walk, you can meet a whole bunch of needs? Some of us in Flagstaff do, most of us in Flagstaff do not. How can we think more about that 15-minute neighborhood and give more people access to that type of neighborhood? So for every target area, we have this kind of will statement that was here. So we will depend far less on cars. We will reduce our VMT and shift trips to walking and biking. We then have these strategies. These strategies are the meat of the plan. I say that and they're really simple, right? But within the plan document that is online now, and again, I will link to it, we have examples of what this might look like, right? So transforming our transportation land use system, that's kind of just the big shift. We need to make a big shift in how we think about these systems. Vibrancy, appropriate density. This looks like, how do we loosen up our land code restrictions, right? So that maybe my neighbor can, can he build a bigger ADU in his home and let someone else live in our neighborhood? Then that person might have a better bike commute to work because we get to enjoy a pretty nice bike commute. Can some more folks in our neighborhood help us out, right? Can we maybe have a corner store in our neighborhood that then we wouldn't have to go and drive to, Walmart or Target to get everything that we need to do, right? Or Sprouts or Fry's, right? Can we maybe take a nice walk down to the corner store? What might that look like in our existing neighborhoods? The third is the ATMP. I'll talk about the Active Transportation Master Plan a lot, I'm sure. This is about the networks. The fourth is about encouragement. So those both reinforce the ATMP. And the encouragement sort of follows the infrastructure, right? We need good infrastructure to ask people to take it, right? The fifth is about transforming our policies and planning. And then the sixth is about transit operations and partnering with Mountain Line. Congestion mitigation and air quality non-attainment status, that is the federal designation. Mainly we want to avoid that. And can we invest in that avoidance of non-attainment? Because it would save us a whole lot of money if we don't go into non-attainment status, basically. I'm going to go really quickly through our next areas just because they're supportive, mainly cleaning our energy source. So here we have clean electricity, that's solar. Building electrification, that's switching from natural gas and propane over to electricity. The reason there is because electricity gets cleaner over time, and APS is already committed to 100% clean energy clean electricity, by 2050. I do want to talk about electric mobility. It's already come up tonight. Thank you, Councilmember McCarthy, for referencing our code. But electric mobility is really important. We need to reduce our reliance on cars, and we need to reduce the number of of trips that we take in cars. And then we need to think about electric mobility. So I just want to be really clear about the kind of order there. That said, electric mobility is going to be really important. First, we want to think about buses. NAPTA has already committed to electrifying buses. Commissioner Kuhn, we want to work with you and figure out, yeah, how can we work with FEOC? How can we work with NAU, right? How can we think about getting, incentives and getting federal support that we think we're going to see more coming through of in order to get that electrification. We also want to think about micromobility devices. Kids in my neighborhood have scooters and hoverboards and all kinds of stuff, right? But how do we think about that? Because every time somebody takes one of those trips, it's so much more efficient from not only an energy perspective, but from a space perspective, right? Of not moving a 1-ton vehicle across town for something that a scooter can take you across town with, right? So how can we think about how to welcome those modes in our community? And then finally, the transition to electric vehicles, it is happening very quickly. How do we support that? We don't want to be in the way of that, right, as the city. And how can we make that happen and facilitate that? I'm not going to go into these, but our final focus areas are reduced building energy use, so plain old energy efficiency, and then sustainable consumption and waste management, and then finally that carbon dioxide removal. So that is what I have. The main idea is climate action makes life better. It leads to so many great things, and so there are a lot of co-benefits that we're excited to work with y'all on. There's a lot of options for funding too. We fund a lot of things in our community in a lot of different ways, and so we want to think about different funding options. We ask about this in our survey. And then finally, many hands can make light work. So we know that the market, utility companies, our community members, businesses, leaders in this community will all be needed to make all of this happen. So in terms of what's next, and again, I will send you out links for all of these. Right now we're in the review. We will be taking this draft plan to City Council on May 18th. We have a community forum survey up right now. If you've taken it before, thank you. This is our 5th survey, I believe, right now, but this one speaks exactly to the draft plan and the strategies that are within it. So it's a little bit more specific than the ones in the past. We do have an open house website as well that has 24, I think, different videos from community members talking about this plan and talking about different elements of carbon neutrality. So that is what I have for you today. I just really appreciate the time, again, of this commission and your commitment to continuing to have this conversation. And thank you. I'd be more than happy to answer.
Thank you, Ms. Mew. Your audio got funky, but it was the last 15 seconds, so that's good. No other issues. Would you mind going back to the slide that had the funding opportunities? That was something, a long list of, how we find ways to pay for these, like I said before, big ambitious endeavors.
Of course, yep. And so here we've kind of just saying, like, look, there's a lot of ways, right, that the city pays for things, and how can we think about that for climate, right? We might not have necessarily thought about it in this way, but at the same time, 419 is a good example. That is how we've paid for, bike and ped projects have a slice of the 419 money, right? And so can we think about, in some ways that is a climate project, right? Can we think about other creative ways to do this? And I should have said, I'm sorry, we will be working on a funding plan after we get direction from City Council. So on May 18th, we need kind of the okay to say, this is how we're moving forward, right? To say, all right, this is it. And then after that, we will be working, we already have started these investment conversations with some outside advisors on how to do this and how a city might do this. But so that's why there's a lot of kind of possibilities right now. We will be narrowing down on that after the passage of this plan, potential passage.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I look at our agenda for tonight, and everything on this agenda is tied to somehow, some way, transportation and sustainability and climate action, and ITS alone increasing those efficiencies, and Mountain Line in their 5-year plan, and ridership, and giving people options, and really with MetroPlan's work, looking at grants for Lone Tree south of Butler, and that's to improve multimodal connectivity. It's not 100% focused on vehicles. It's just not not how things are going anymore, to give people those options. And it's about social equity. So I appreciate your enthusiasm and everything that you've shared. Commissioners, let's see, I'd like to point out there is an open house at 6 o'clock tonight. And I did get the email about that. So I have received notification about these open houses. So they are going out into the community. Yep. So that's in the chat for folks. Commissioners, do you have comments, questions for Ms. Neiman?
Yeah, Ms. Neiman?
Yes.
Mr. Kuhn, why in your funding, I don't see voter initiated bonds or projects that you go out to the voters? I live off of Elk Run. There's no sidewalks there yet. And I'm a big walker. Cars fly and you don't see a lot of people. And that's a mechanism and other things. And I know city's doing a great job putting sidewalks but situations like that.
Thank you, Commissioner Kuhn. And I appreciate the question. So I should have said that the sales tax as well as a bond would have to be approved by voters. So both of those would be voter approved projects that we would go out to the voters and try and talk about what that would mean. And that maybe you're right. It may be sidewalks, right? It may be infrastructure. Maybe it's paired with the active transportation master plan, right? Where we're doing, some transportation things. We're doing some public health things, right? There's a lot of ways it could look, but absolutely. That would be a big part of that is voter bonds or a voter approved sales tax.
Thank you.
Of course, thank you.
Other comments or questions from commissioners? Right. Well, thank you for your time again. This is exciting. I'm excited about these ideas of a 15-minute neighborhood. I get excited about how we transform and shift mode choice, and I have a feeling my fellow commissioners do as well. So I look forward to participating in one of the open houses and seeing this move forward.
Thank you very much. I just really appreciate the opportunity to talk to y'all, and I'm here whenever y'all want to chat and whenever we can support your work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Okay, then we will move on to item 2D. This is Mountain Line's 5-year plan update. This is an informational item. No formal action is required. And Kate, would you like to introduce this item, please?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Kate Morley, Deputy General Manager at Mountain Line. Busy Collins, our transit planner, sends her regrets she wasn't able to present herself. She's going to project manage this for us, and we just wanted to take a few minutes to let the commission know what we have planned. So the 5-year plan is a required update to the transit plan by FTA and ADOT standards. However, we're definitely looking for a major overhaul or relook at the Mountain Line system. And one of our major goals here is Mountain Line's really maxed out the funding that we currently have available for the transit system. And if the transit system is to expand, we need to understand what people are willing to pay for and what methods they're willing to pay for. So you'll see a pretty big focus as we update our 5-year plan on that connection to, what are people willing to fund to implement, because we don't have extra money sitting around to put more service on the streets. So it's going to be a process that we kick off here in the next couple months. We're going to call the plan Flagstaff in Motion. And really try to explore what is it that people want from the transit system, and then secondary to that, what are they actually willing to fund out of that? There's definitely some big questions on the table. We know that the frequency is a good thing for transit systems, so we're not looking to reduce frequency on the system. We are reopening a conversation about, are there missing services that people want to explore, such as the Huntington corridor? Are there opportunities for new transportation like micro transit? you know, are there new areas of town that we need to serve? You know, the Sky Cottages discussion that we had several weeks ago with council, and are people willing to fund that, and in what methods? So we hope to have the project wrapped up in December. That gives us the opportunity to consider a 2022 ballot initiative if that's what comes out of the plan. But prior to that, as I said, it'll be a very heavy focus on community input and outreach. There'll be multiple opportunities for surveys, as well as focus groups occurring, and a stakeholders committee set up. So if anybody's interested in participating in any of that, we can definitely get the word out. But we just want to let the commission know that this was about to kick off and to look for it in the coming weeks, and that those are the major topics that we're exploring. And if you have any feedback for me on what you would like to see explored or questions answered, now would be a good time for that input.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Morley. Commissioners, Commissioner Kraft.
Hi. I'm curious if you already stepped on this. Forgive me for missing it, but just sort of what is the current future of the downtown transit center, and what are the plans for that area?
That's a great question. We're still really excited about the transit center. We went to council last week to acknowledge the trade-off of a loss of parking to be able to expand the center, and we did hear no formal action, but head nods from the majority of council members to go ahead and keep moving forward with that design. So we are planning a building as well as an expansion of the transit bays. We're planning improvements to Phoenix Avenue. If you've driven on Phoenix Avenue with the buses, you know what a challenge that can be to pass with the parking on the side. So we want to improve that cross section. And then a major component for us actually is we were really looking for a light at Phoenix and Milton. How that light functions, I think, is a question mark in terms of, is it for all traffic? Is it only activated if there's a bus there? Those are all things that are on the table, but the ability for us to make safe left turns at that intersection is really important part of the project. So we are moving forward. There's lots of questions out there about how we master plan the rest of the site besides the transit operational needs, but we're definitely moving forward with the transit components.
Okay, and I had heard of possible integrated parking, also possible a footbridge that would cross Milton, or at that point it'd be 66, I think. Are those still on the table?
Yeah, so we're planning to align the Foots connection that goes along under Route 66 with the Rio de Flag project through our property to connect to the south and Mike's Pike, per what's in the active transportation master plan. So we'll definitely make that infrastructure, or plan for that infrastructure. As far as crossing Milton goes, we're really advocating for an at-grade crossing with ADOT. It's really expensive to build a separated structure and not as easy for pedestrians to use. So we want the signal itself basically to allow the crossing for a pedestrian. So we'll be working towards that. And then as far as an integrated parking structure goes, there may end up being a parking structure on that site as we master plan the whole site. But we're looking for the transit center to move forward in the next year or two. And so we're really building to the west to stay out of the Rio de Flag. After the Rio de Flag, there could be opportunities for parking, but at this time it won't be directly connected to the transit center, but maybe a phase 2 for a future project.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Kuhn.
Commissioner Morley, good job on that. How much are you going to look into the outlying areas, Kachina Village and obviously Donny Park? I know we get asked that all the time. We just worked with the county and put in a bus winter stop at Kachina Village.
So that's a really great question. I think it is on the table, especially as we're asking the community what they want to pay for, or those services they want to pay for. I'll be interested in seeing what the results are, because those outlying communities don't vote in a local tax initiative. So whether or not we can get the support to move, a route to Donny Park, if Donny Park voters aren't voting, I think that's a big question, but it's definitely something on the table that we're willing to explore. There could be other funding mechanisms through the county as well to look at that. So we're open to all options at this stage, but I do wonder if it's a City of Flagstaff tax initiative that moves forward, if anything moves forward, and I should qualify that, whether or not the City of Flagstaff voters are going to vote for service to the outlying areas.
Thank you.
Well, Commissioner Morley, there's, as you know, Northern Arizona Healthcare is looking to relocate their medical campus from the Hospital Hill to south of Mountain Dell and north of Fort Tut Hill. And that's a very significant project. And it's not just for medical facilities. We'll likely see it, if that moves forward, we'll likely see a lot of growth in that area along Woody Mountain. I mean, we're already seeing so much growth along Woody Mountain Road, south of Woody Mountain Road, and making that connection out towards the airport. And as I think about the current system, there isn't service out there, and that area still is in city limits. So thinking about Flagstaff in motion and bringing in growth where we're going to have significant growth and aligning that with transit, that's just something on my mind, and I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments about that.
Yeah, I think those are some of the really big issues that are out there in terms of our existing network functions really well. We're not looking for a major overhaul of that, but yeah, what are these new connections? There's not a good process in place right now to ask for development to pay in under any existing rules. And so is that something the voters want to pay for? Are there other mechanisms? But from our perspective, having new areas of town that don't have transit service is a fundamental equity issue, and then also the affordability issue and climate action issue. So we really do believe that as we expand to new areas, that transit service should be a part of that to meet the not just Mountain Line goals, but the adopted goals of the City of Flagstaff. So I think that's a huge gap. And again, our existing goal is frequency. That's what makes a bus work. People don't want to take a bus if it only comes once an hour. Route 10 that comes every 8 minutes, it's really easy to take. You don't have to think about it. You just walk outside. So somehow finding that balance of having the frequencies that make the bus convenient to use, like your car's convenient to use. And, we're not even going to get that close, but trying to get there. And then the balance of getting the coverage out there are important trade-offs. Basically, you can think every bus we put on the system costs us approximately $500,000 to run a year. So we can either add that to we can make that frequency for an existing route, or we can make that coverage. And finding that perfect balance is hard. In my opinion, anything less than 20 minutes, you see ridership change when you get to 20 minutes or better. Less than that becomes difficult for people to plan their lives around. So I know I danced around your question a little bit, but ultimately, I think it's really important to have transit where the city expands. And I think that beyond the hospital, that part of town is going to expand in a significant way. And that needs to be part of the plan.
Thank you. It was also a way for me to, call it to the commissioner's attention of, projects that are underway that are going to have a big impact on our transportation network in Flagstaff. And everything goes hand in hand. Any other comments or questions from commissioners? All right. Well, thank you, Commissioner Morley. With that, it sounds like we will move to the next item of the agenda, which is item 2E, City of Flagstaff Engineering Standards and Residential Roadway Geometry. This is an informational item. No formal action is required. And the background on this is it's come up a number of times, either in the community in conversation with public addressing us, or even just on our commission about why we design things a certain way, why the engineering standards look the way they do. So I thought this would be a great opportunity. I think Reed Miller will be presenting this to us to just talk about where we are today. And it's interesting as we listening to Ms. Neiman earlier about the 15-minute neighborhood and looking at zoning and codes and how things might shift in the future. So this is a great foundation for those conversations. So with that, I'll turn it over. Reed, are you here with us to present this item?
Yes, can you hear me all right?
I sure can. Thank you.
Sure, and thank you for the introduction. And hello, let's see, Chairman Lead and Commissioners. Here's the outline of what I'm planning on going over this evening. I want to go over our current residential street sections for the city of Flagstaff, compare them to some other cities of similar size that I looked into. I looked into about 5. I picked Provo, Utah, and Boulder, Colorado to show on the screen because they not only gave me street sections, but there are also volumes, traffic volumes associated with them, which to me is a very important aspect of what we're looking at. I have a summary table that kind of compares the dimensions, features, and volumes of each of these other cities, the 2 cities and Flagstaff. Then I have an example plat, Timber Sky, that reflects our current standards and how they apply. And then a conclusions sheet that we can kind of spur some discussion from. So my first slide, the city of Flagstaff used to have 3 residential street sections. We recently removed the most narrow of those street sections. This was what we called our residential local narrow street. And it's what we called a queuing street. It allows for 2-way traffic unless there are cars parked on either one or both sides, in which case oncoming traffic needed to what we call queue or wait for another car to pass before they could proceed. And we would apply this to an average daily traffic of a maximum of 250, which was approximately 25 homes. This street was, again, residential, and bikes were accommodated in the travel lanes, and there was on-street parking allowed on both sides. This became problematic to both Public Works and the fire department. Fire department's codes changed, and they determined that this street was just not wide enough to accommodate their needs with the current codes, so it was removed. The next street is our residential. This is our predominant street that we allow for up to a maximum of 500 ADT. That's average daily traffic. On-street parking is allowed on both sides. It's not striped. Bikes are again accommodated in the travel lanes. This street, it becomes somewhat of a queuing street if there are cars parked on just one side. It allows for 2-way traffic, but if cars are parked on both sides, it's a little tight, although 2 cars can pass. And this, we allow for ADT up to 500. And finally, this is our widest of our local residential streets. You can see it allows for parking on both sides. Travel lanes of 10.5 feet one in each direction. And so this is not a queuing street. And we will allow this street to accommodate up to a maximum of 1,000 ADT. Beyond that, we say you must not have any access to a street. We go to our collector street, and in that case, there is no on-street parking. access is not provided to single-family residences. Head-out access is the only access type, and this is for access to industrial, commercial, and multifamily. Bike lanes are provided because of the higher speeds and the higher volumes. Bicyclists do not feel comfortable on a street of this type unless there are bike lanes. An example of this street that's existing would be High Country Trail and Ponderosa Trails. And there are no single family lots fronting this. There are a couple of apartment complexes that I can think of and some townhouse developments. The first of our cities that we compared our sections to is Provo, Utah. A lot of the street sections were similar, although I found that the traffic volumes that were allowed were surprisingly higher than what we allow. This is the first street that they have for their residential streets. They do allow only parking on one side, which helps. It becomes a queuing street if there's a car parked on one side, but it's only for an ADT of less than 400. Their next street is 30 feet wide, 30 feet of asphalt, has an ADT of between 400 and 1400. And again, our residential streets only allow up to 1000 ADT. On-street parking is allowed on both sides. And this is again similar to our residential local street, but the volumes are so much higher at 1400 versus 1000. Then they have one that's even considerably wider than our widest residential street, and it allows ADT, or it's used when ADTs are exceeding 1400. I could not find the upper limits on this one. And I do want to point out that one of the other differences is that these have considerably larger planters, 7 feet versus ours at 6, and sidewalks that are 6 versus 5. And again, this is used for ADTs greater than 1400, where the city of Flagstaff has a maximum of 1000 ADT for any residential street that accommodates access to single family lots. Beyond this street, Provo has a collector street. I don't have the striping dimensions on this, but presumably this could handle 2 12-foot travel lanes, a 12-foot center turn lane, and fairly generous bike lanes. The next city that we looked at was Boulder, Colorado. This is their access street, they call it. It's for volumes of less than 500 ADT. On-street parking is allowed. And so this is almost identical to the street that we just removed from our section.
When was that removed, Reed?
I think it was within about a year ago. I don't remember the date, but it's been approximately about a year ago. Do you remember it being removed?
I don't.
No.
I'm going with the 2018 or 2019 standard update. So maybe 3 years, but time flies.
Certainly does. Let's see. The next street section for Boulder allows for ADTs between 500 and 1000. On-street parking is allowed on both sides. Again, no bike lanes. And this would be considered a queuing street, which is pretty generous for those volumes. Boulder has a residential collector street that also has really high volumes for not much more pavement. 1,000 ADT to up to 2,500 ADT. And it allows for on-street parking on both sides. Additional width is required if it's needed to accommodate bike lanes. I don't know what the threshold is for when bike lanes would be required. And this particular street section provides access to single families. So those are really high volumes for providing access to single family. This is the comparison summary table of the streets that we just went over. The city of Flagstaff and city of Provo, city of Boulder. All of the street sections are pretty similar in dimension, but the ADTs over here on the right column, I found to be considerably higher than what we currently allow. And I mentioned it earlier, we allow 1,000 ADT for our max on residential streets. If you don't mind, Jeff, it'd be nice if you touched on where that number, how we arrived at that number as our threshold.
That's kind of a historical number, and though I've seen it repeated in some publications, but it's kind of a rule of thumb historical number when we start to see volumes on residential streets. So that's a street with back out parking off of individual driveways and single family homes. We see volumes over 1,000. It's very common for us to hear from those neighborhoods that they're unhappy with the traffic on their street, whether it's speeding or volumes or both. That's the threshold when people typically start calling us with complaints. So yeah, really surprising. These other communities are accepting the much higher volumes and presumably are not getting the complaints at those volumes, or they would probably be changing something. Not totally sure. We haven't chased that all the way to the end, but that's really interesting here.
Yeah. This next slide is some bullet points. I took some excerpts out of our design specifications because I wanted to demonstrate kind of how we achieve our slow speed design and low volumes. So Flagstaff residential roads are designed for slow speeds and low volumes. This first sentence says the maximum tangent or straight length of a residential local street should be no more than 500 feet to discourage high speeds. Beyond 500 feet, you need to introduce a horizontal curve. This was introduced, according to this, back in 2017. The next bullet says when designing the roads in a new subdivision, access needs of the adjacent development or undeveloped land must be addressed in the engineer's design report. Alignment shall be so arranged so as to discourage through traffic onto the local streets. I'm sorry, I keep hitting the wrong button there. So the reason that is important is when you're developing a subdivision that is going to connect to some undeveloped land, forethought needs to be some thought needs to be put into what that adjacent property is going to be developed as, and the connecting road. What's it need to look like? Does it need to be one of our wider residential streets, or perhaps even a collector, so that if we don't end up with homes fronting a street that should have been a collector, and we end up with something similar to what we're dealing with on University Avenue. This next bullet point says that residential streets are designed to 20 miles per hour. Slower design speeds help to meet the following requirement, which is spelled out in our standards. It says the street plan of a proposed subdivision shall bear a logical relation to the topography of the property. So we try to design our streets to flow with the topography as much as possible, to reduce cuts and fills and disturbance to the resources, as well as to provide easier access into the properties they serve. The next slide was a concept plat of Timber Sky, and I bring this up to show how that our standards are met through this platting. This is the Spine Road, if you can see my cursor. The Spine Road, which is a collector road through Timber Sky. It connects to Woody Mountain Road here at Presidio Drive, this roundabout at Presidio Drive. And then it connects out to Route 66. A new roundabout was constructed in Timber Sky, and this road connects also out to Route 66. They elected, it wasn't required, but they elected to put in a raised median that will be landscaped. The point I wanted to make here, though, is that there are spine roads here, which are collectors, and none of the single family lots access from this collector road. They're all accessed from residential local roads that tie into the collectors. This was an old concept plat that I found that showed the overall plan. Subsequently, I got this from the platting that has recently taken place. We've got plats for these 3 blocks. Some of them are actually completed and homes are under construction. And I heard recently that some are about ready to take occupancy. So let's bring this to some conclusions. Our current standards for residential streets are designed for low speeds and low volumes. Where existing streets do not meet our current standards, resulting in above normal volumes and speeds. And with access to single family lots, we can apply a variety of mitigation features when appropriate. Our guidebook for residential traffic management is used to determine if mitigation is necessary. And within our engineering standards, we have a table, perhaps you've seen it, table 10.10.02, that includes a plethora of traffic calming features for local residential streets, including traffic circles, chicanes, street narrowing, medians, bump outs, etc. that could be applied. And these are some of the things that we've been talking about. For instance, on University Avenue, how we might be able to slow traffic there. Which of these features might we apply to that? So that's the end of my PowerPoint presentation. Happy to take any comments, questions, any input.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Commissioner Morley, we'll start with you.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. I first want to acknowledge that I probably created this work for you with my many comments here at the commission about the speeding that we continually hear about in neighborhoods. So thank you. I found this presentation really helpful. I do have some comments. I think that this is a huge opportunity moment for the city. We just enacted or we're working on a climate neutrality plan. We have a climate emergency in place. And I appreciate the background research and see a lot of opportunity for the city to consider new things. So some of the things I heard, and I scrambled on my notes, so pardon me while I go through them. I actually love the narrow street concept. I'm sad to see that go. I think there are a lot of places in this community that could benefit from that. And I wonder if instead of removing that, we needed to think about, I think there was parking involved, and we needed to think about whether or not the on-street parking was the priority over the alternative of having a narrow street cross-section. I'd love to see, I understand fire's concerns, but I'd love to see an opportunity to bring back a narrow cross-section. I don't feel like that was a step in the climate direction that we just talked about. Also, I just generally want to comment on parking. The zone, I think a lot of the challenges that we see are related to the fact that we're designing for parking on both sides of the street. Meanwhile, the zoning code is requiring parking on the lot. And so it's not that there's a problem with the lane widths. I think we're overbuilding parking, and that's creating the speeding issues that we're seeing in a lot of these neighborhoods, because nobody's actually parked out on the streets. Cars are going much faster than the 20-mile-an-hour design speed you intended it to be for. And I really appreciate that you're designing for lower speeds. I think that's really important. I would say I actually think if you asked a lot of people what the appropriate speed of a car in a neighborhood is, it's probably less than 25. I wonder if we should be designing for 15 to bring that down even further. Because I think you do hear a lot of complaints when cars actually drive 25 and there's kids out playing. I don't know that I feel as strongly, and I'm not an engineer, so I'll preference it with that. I don't know that I feel as strongly about needing to tie some of the cross sections to volumes in the same way. Like, I think you showed like you got a couple extra feet out of one cross section over another because of an increase in volume. But really, aren't we trying to manage the speed through which people, these are residential areas, so the speed through which people are moving through? Does it matter if there's 100 cars moving through or 500 cars running through? Shouldn't we be working on character and speed and, you know, control? And I appreciate all these things in the engineering standard that are really creative solutions, but I'd love for us to find a way to design things that we didn't have to go add these things to after the fact or be adding in these controls later. Quick other comments would be sidewalks at 5 feet. I think that's a really minimal standard if you actually want people in neighborhoods to walk in them. I think you find people are walking in streets because if you can't walk side by side with a partner without bumping into them on a 5-foot sidewalk. I live on the new section of Navajo. I think it's really beautiful. We walk in the street, even though there's new sidewalks there. And then bike lanes, I just always wonder when I see a 4.5-foot bike lane, if that's adequate also to get people to use it and if that actually feels safe. And I just question if we always need these, if the standard should be a center turn, or if we should be thinking about character improvements and putting turns in where turns are needed. And I feel like we're sacrificing some of those edge improvements for that center turn lane, and often center turn lanes don't have anyone in them. So those are my comments. I really appreciate you bringing this forward. I actually would love to see this something that the city would, you know, pick up and say, many things have changed since we last did a comprehensive update of the engineering standards, including a climate emergency, including an affordable housing emergency. So the more land we take up with roadway, the less we can build housing on. And I would think it would be an awesome project and a win for the city to consider a holistic look at engineering standards and where we can realign them with our goals related to climate and affordability. So thank you so much. I know that was a ton. I just think there's a ton of opportunity here and I'm really excited about it.
Great.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you. We've got Commissioner Kraft and then Vice Chair Parks.
Howdy. I mean, I note that this is residential. However, I'm also curious about how do larger thoroughfares such as the future Lone Tree fit into things? Is that a totally separate design when you get to that scale and scope? When you're dealing with what Lone Tree will be when it's built out?
I think it's a different subject matter for sure than what we've been dealing with here. What we've been dealing with here is residents that are just not happy with their local streets with such high volumes, high speeds, in their opinion. But when you get to these collectors and arterials, that's more about safely moving traffic at certain speeds. So yeah, I would say that's a different topic.
Okay.
Completely.
I would suggest a future time when we cover those as well, because I have curiosity about that. So, but thank you very much. That was very informative. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, Vice Chair Parks.
First of all, I want to apologize for the peanut gallery behind me, but Anyway, I want to go back to a couple of Commissioner Morley's remarks. She hit a lot of points I was going to make, but I want to talk about being a pedestrian in a neighborhood community with a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit, especially if we are going to add curvature to the streets. The sight lines become difficult at that speed for a pedestrian trying to make a crossing. So I would echo Commissioner Morley's support for 15 miles an hour as neighborhood speeds. You really think about the size of a neighborhood in Flagstaff and how much delay is not really caused by a much slower speed limit. I mean, 15 miles is 2 times across Flagstaff. So I would really support much slower speeds. The other thing I also would support is in newly developed neighborhoods, not going to be possible probably in older neighborhoods, is off-street neighborhood parking. I see this a lot in condominium communities. I've seen them in Southern California, for example. And this is a place to pick up the excess parking rather than on street. Also for RV owners. So just two thoughts of mine.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from commissioners? Okay. Any other comments or questions from those in attendance? All right. Well, it sounds like there is great interest in talking about this, reviewing it, if that's an opportunity for the Transportation Commission. I heard that it'd be good to talk about collectors and arterials, the foundation of how those are designed, the standards for those at a future meeting. I would add we probably also need to look at some of the new accessibility guidelines, not necessarily new, but some of the accessibility guidelines for sidewalk widths, to what Commissioner Morley had said about 5-foot wide sidewalk. Looking at I think Boulder and Provo each had certain sections where they had a wider sidewalk width. As we talk about mode share and increasing options for people, really evaluating bike and ped infrastructure to make it comfortable and safe. So those are some of the things that I've heard and some of the things on my mind. So with that, Reed and Jeff, thank you very much for bringing this to the commission and talking with us about it. It is, as you can tell, a hot topic for all of us that we'd love to discuss more moving forward if given the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Before we move on, I won't go through, I was going to respond to a few things, but I'll keep it simple. What do you want us to bring back? I heard a lot, but I didn't hear any direction on what you, other than collectors and arterials, which is a whole different topic. What exactly do you want to talk about? Because I'm not sure I have what I need to bring something different back to you other than what we brought tonight.
What is the process for revisions to the engineering standards? So, for example, if there was a desire to change parking, how is that decided? What is that process for making a change to geometry for removal of on-street parking, perhaps?
Perfect. Yeah, I love working through examples. So if we wanted to remove, or the commission wanted to talk about it some more and came to consensus that parking on one side of the street or both sides of the street we're removing parking from one side or both sides of the street from a residential section made sense to them, then yeah, we would initially reach out to internal departments like Public Works, like the fire department, perhaps police and parking services. This will affect everyone. We already know some of the answers for fire. I think we've already worked through that on the narrow section, but we could certainly go through it with you. We'd go through those things and have a discussion. If everyone on staff and the commission were on the same page, then we have a typical public outreach process for engineering standard updates. Usually they are happening every year or two, so we group these changes with those other changes, and they would go through that process. So we talk to local engineers, talk to local architects, land development people, and just public in general. If we're still on the same page and we're going in the right direction, yeah, then eventually we get to public discussion with the city council and eventually city council adoption.
Okay. Thank you for outlining that process. Commissioners, can I get your reaction to that process and your appetite for pursuing this? Commissioner Morley.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's clear I have an appetite for it. I'm curious if you said there's standards that get updated every 2 years, is now a good time to kick off a conversation about what the commission might want to see so we could initiate some of those next steps or like float our ideas to staff. I'm not sure if that can happen in just a commission meeting or if we would need like a work session or something to go through everything that we might see as opportunities. So those are my initial thoughts, but I am interested, and but I'm curious how you see that timing playing out with your typical every year or two updates.
So yeah, let me be clear. It's not me that does the engineering standard updates. It's a different group within engineering. Reed may know the answer to the question of whether they're in the process right now and what the cycle looks like. I don't know. Reed would know, perhaps.
Yeah, in fact, we met last week. We're kind of wrapping up the most recent revisions. So I think it's a little late to introduce something new. And I would suspect that they would want to target another revision that may take place in the next two or 3 years, we'll say. But it wouldn't be too early to start for that round.
And things like street lighting, I did on my own and just took that because it was a big enough item, took it on my own, didn't wait for their cycle. So if we had a series of road cross sections, then we might have to go it alone, which is just, puts more on Reed and I, which is okay, but we'll probably slow it down even more because we don't have a ton of capacity. But happy to talk about these things because the first thing to do is just talk about it and figure out if there's even interest, if they make sense internally, staff can be supportive or not, and just how many of these are real and how many are just good ideas but not maybe possible for certain reasons. You're always surprised by the limitations there are out there.
I'm not sure how the process would go on this actually, because most of our revisions are just minor changes or things that really don't affect the public that much. Something like this you'd have to have I think a different process for how you'd approach it. I'm not sure how that would play out.
Commissioner Kraft, I see your hand up, but I don't know if that's leftover or new. Leftover. Okay. I think keeping this on the agenda, what I would be very interested in for next meeting, and this will give us a little bit more time to think about it and maybe have some conversations, but for the next time we meet, understanding emergency service requirements specifically, because I feel like that is a lot of times the foundation for what drives the geometry. So it would be helpful, I think, for us to hear these are minimums and these are general requirements, because that's not something that can be sacrificed, in my opinion.
Sure, we can work through that. We have had those discussions in the past, specifically about that really skinny street that we used to have, and whether, you know, parking, whether there's parking on the street or not, and how that affects how they measure the width they need for their apparatus during firefighting operations. So yeah, we can get you some clear information on that, or maybe just even invite the fire department in case there's questions that you think of during the meeting.
Thank you.
That we can do, and that's very focused. That's what I was looking for. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that will give us some time as individuals to kind of process what we've heard, what we've seen, and to be able to offer more comment at that time and have some more information. Commissioner Kraft and then Vice Chair Parks.
I'm assuming we're trying to educate ourselves on the matters that we're dealing with so that we can make better decisions. And I just want to make sure we're not piecemealing it, you know, that we may want to consider sort of a holistic approach to educating ourselves. Like, are we missing something, or are we just gonna like pick things as they come up in front of us in our mind, or should we devote a little time to coming up with a curriculum or something like that? I mean, just so that we cover everything that we need to. It just struck me.
Vice Chair Parks.
Yep. Besides emergency services, I think that being in snow country, we should hear from Public Works as well, because snow plowing operations also require some width, particularly with respect to dumping the snow other than in places like sidewalks. So yeah, we need to hear from them. I guess what would be also good is if we could look forward to what new neighborhoods are coming online, or new service districts, in particular the hospital. And I agree with sorry, a fellow commissioner there, whose name I can't see on the screen right now, but yeah, that we probably do need to continue to educate ourselves, because it seems to me that the issues coming up to this commission are getting more and more complex. This is not just about traffic calming on a given residential street. So I think this is a good endeavor for us.
Thank you. Commissioner Kuhn, I don't think I've heard from you. Do you have comments?
You know, I look in at in factions that, you know, that Commissioner Morley said too, that, you know, you have to look at the affordability of the new subdivisions, and are they building such large roads and the lots become so expensive? So you have to find a compromise somewhere in there that affordability is thing. You know, we've been declining as a school population now for a number of years because families can't afford to move here. And you have to look at what's the longevity when you have when the 30-year neighbors now are from the valley. So you know, that's the way I look at it. You got to compromise. There has to be a compromise.
Thank you. So Jeff, what I have heard is maybe just coming back to the commission in June with some more facts as part of that learning. So the fire emergency services requirement, and Yeah, I guess that's primarily.
Snow.
And snow
Street
removal. Thank you.
operations.
Public Works. I was like, what's the other one? Public Works. Public Works and snow removal. Thank you.
Yeah, snow removal is not an everyday thing, but it becomes a really acute issue when we have those narrow streets in Ponderosa Trails and we actually get a pretty good storm. Lots of complaints come in. People are really concerned that emergency services can't even get to them. And that's obviously is rare, but it's a really big deal for folks living on those streets and a big deal for the emergency services people as well. So absolutely right. There's a balance, definitely a balance to this.
Well, thank you again for doing this and having this conversation. With that, that's given me a lot to think about. So I'm just checking the chat, make sure we addressed everything. Okay, great. So with that, I think we can move on to item 2F. It's our final item of new business. This is the Transportation Capital Improvement Program. Jeff, are you planning to deliver this, or is this Brett?
Yes, I have good news for your appetite and your clock. This is not quite ready. There's a draft 5-year program that's being prepared and will be presented to City Council at their budget retreat in, I think, 2.5 weeks. So not quite ready to put it out there yet. So I put it on the agenda to make sure we were ready, and then I got the news today that we weren't quite ready, which is better than the opposite, having the information, not being able to present it. So we can keep moving down the agenda.
All right. Old business, we have none listed. Concluding general business for BAC and PAC. Is there anything that you have to share, Jeff? I don't think I see Martin on this evening's call.
Martin is here. I'm not sure if
he
he wants.
Is. I'm sorry. I apologize.
He's been very quiet. Oh, here we go.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am here.
Sorry.
No worries. So we both committees are continuing kind of discussion on different aspects or components of the active transportation master plan. And recently the Bike Advisory Committee has been working a lot on bikeways. Most recently, they've been discussing kind of the difference between planning for a foot system and planning for bikeways. Really briefly, in that, for a long time, kind of our pattern for busy streets was to have bike lanes on the street, and then in some cases where they were planned, a foots trail off to the side, and that was intended to accommodate bicyclists on the street. But if you didn't want to be on the street, you'd be on the foots trail. Now, if we're doing a better job with accommodating bicyclists in different protected or separated bike lanes, it sort of calls into question whether we need foots trails along those streets, or whether foots kind of functions better as a network or a system that's away from the street. That's still complementary, but not necessarily along street. So they've been kind of working through some of those issues. They come into play where we have future roadway projects coming up, either in the short term or in the further term. There's an illustration of it, and where we have planned foots trails and bike lanes, and if there's something better or different that we want to do with those streets, and there's some imperative to it, because some of those projects are moving forward, as you can see on the screen. Lone Tree Road, for example, is moving forward in design, and so we have to have some of these questions answered and some of the discussion worked through before we can we move forward with the roadway. And then both committees, and pedestrian committee in particular, is reviewing our list of priority projects and kind of fitting that into the capital program, and including the projects that we would build with the first last mile grant that was referenced earlier this evening for $5.5 million. And I'm sorry, I'm taking more time than I should, but we have a full committee for pedestrian advisory committee, and the three that you appointed were very engaged, very intelligent members. And we are thankful. I'm personally thankful that it's easy to have to meet a quorum every month, and it was getting to be a struggle there for a while. So thank the commission for doing that for us.
Well, that's a great report, and I'm excited to hear about some of the changes or things you're looking at for bike and ped. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Martin on BAC, PAC goings on? All right. Well, I know you've been working really hard on the ATMP, Martin, and so has the BAC and PAC. And let us know how we can help. We're excited to see that moving forward. So, all right, item 4B, informational items. Starting with commissioner discussion. Any discussion, anything, commissioners, you have announcements that you would like to bring up? Now is the time. I have one while you think of yours. I would like to congratulate Jeff Bauman for the Aspen Award for his perseverance and diligence on the SLEDS program, a many-year project that you saw to the end, a successful completion, and council awarded him with the Aspen Award a few weeks ago. So congratulations on that, Jeff. Outstanding.
Thank you. It's not quite to the end. We're still trying to spend money and get these fixtures installed, which is being a bit of a challenge, but thank you. I'm excited about getting to City Hall someday and picking up my plaque.
Right. Councilmember McCarthy.
I just have a question for the commission. We, meaning the city council, just got a petition, a citizen petition, asking us to close the road that links Presidio and the Pines with Woody Mountain. And I just wondered if Woody Mountain, that's not the right word. Presidio and the Pines with the neighborhood to the east. Anyway, yes, Boulder Point. Thank you. I actually live there, so I should know that. So my question is, since this is going to be before council, has the Transportation Commission gotten into this issue at all, or do you plan to?
Councilmember McCarthy, we have discussed it, and it's been in the context of when the gate was opened, and staff has collected traffic. They have traffic counts from before the gate was open between Boulder Point and Presidio. And we've been holding off on getting counts because right when that was underway, COVID happened. And so to go out and do after counts on traffic volumes when COVID hit wouldn't give, we just didn't think it would be the right representation of possible increases in traffic. So that has been on previous agendas. We have had community members address it. We addressed the speeding issue on University, and we had a couple of members of the public at that time that wanted to also discuss. They felt it was all connected, that the pass-through traffic and the speeding was one issue, and we chose to separate them out because, again, we didn't have the updated traffic counts for once the gate was open. And we feel that the speeding issue has been an issue even when the gate was closed. So that's why we separated those out. We have not had a specific agenda item since that time related to Boulder Point. That's
I don't know.
On it.
And just a little more background. I don't know what council will do, if they'll ask you to look into it or if they'll just say, no, we don't want to get into this issue or whatever. But I will say that I don't know when it was, probably 10 years ago, that the city council at that point did address this very specific issue. And they said that that gate would be closed during construction and that after that, it would be open. And I'm not taking sides on it. I'm just, giving you background. So, okay, I think you answered my question. Anyway, it may be a coming attraction. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I think, thank you for letting us know. I think we would be happy to discuss it, particularly. I know it relates back to a development agreement. And of course, the commission isn't necessarily in a position to alter what was done or question kind of that original development agreement too.
All right.
That's my understanding.
Well, thank you. At least you got a heads up.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Any other items from commissioners?
This is Kate.
Oh, Commissioner Morley.
Yes, I have one. Just wanted to let the commission know that the Mountain Line Board did take formal action to what we're saying is a pause in the BRT project. We're going to ask FTA to move our remaining design funds for the BRT to the street improvements associated with the Downtown Connection Center. It doesn't mean Mountain Line's not interested in the BRT anymore. It does mean that the timing is not working out right now and that we have a higher, better use. We will continue to explore the BRT through that 5-year plan update, but just wanted to give the commission that update on the BRT project.
Thank you.
What does BRT stand for again?
Thank you. It's Bus Rapid Transit, and we had a design for a new bus rapid transit route that basically went from the hospital down to Woodlands Village along Milton. And so some of the timing issues that are causing issues are funding issues related to COVID. The Milton CMP process is still in play. I'm not sure when a final date is for that. And so we just felt like we needed to shift resources at the moment.
All right. Moving on to item B2, Jack Welch. I think almost everyone on the commission probably knows Jack, and we need it's time to give him a big thank you for his many years of service on the Transportation Commission, advisory committees. Martin, would you mind speaking to Jack's tenure a bit and what we're thinking about on this one, please?
Of course. So recently, Jack has served on the Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and he was always fairly clear that if there were other people who wanted to serve, that he'd be willing to step aside. So that did happen. So he stepped aside for the moment. It's really not an ending, but more of a kind of a transition. We made it clear in our discussion that we want him to continue to be involved in the committee, as well as be, the advocate for pedestrian issues that he's been over the years. I have to get a complete list of the commissions that he served on, but at a minimum, it's Transportation Commission, Bike Committee, PED Committee, Sustainability, and he might have had a stint on the Open Spaces Commission too. And there might be some other commissions in there as well that I'm missing. And that the Pedestrian Committee in particular exists today because of his efforts. A long time ago, he started it kind of as a pedestrian committee that was outside of the city structure, and that was eventually brought into the city structure as a committee of the Transportation Commission. So he's been pretty instrumental over the years, and unfortunately, he's not really able to participate in meetings in this forum. So we may have to wait until we have an opportunity to meet again in person to give him a proper thank you. I know, Julie, you and I kind of exchanged emails, but I do like the idea of mentioning it if you have an opportunity during the presentation of council, because I think those sort of, the more public a recognition, the more meaningful it is, and council would certainly be an appropriate place to do that.
So that was specific to item B5. we've got this great opportunity for our commission to give an update to City Council in June. And I thought that would be a great time, if appropriate, to honor Jack and all of his years and commitment to the city, commitment to our community, and do something at that time. And then maybe there's a token of our appreciation that we can give, a token of our appreciation being city as well, and the commission. That's something that I think I can work with Jeff and Martin on. But I'd like to hear if my fellow commissioners have any other thoughts or ideas about recognizing Jack. And he's not listening, so you won't be spoiling a surprise.
This is Kate again. The Arizona chapter of the American Planning Association, I believe, recognizes a citizen planner every year, and they're actually taking nominations now. There could be an opportunity to nominate Jack for that award.
I also think it'd be good to do it at a city council meeting. That would be great.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember McCarthy.
That's Commissioner Kuhn. I think we need to think of something that can be named after him and his diligence in the time he's put into Flagstaff.
Okay. A section of foots. As you think of ideas, please email them to Martin or Jeff. All right, with that, I just got notified I am about ready to die on my battery. Low battery here. So let's look to wrap up this this meeting. Transportation engineering staffing update. Jeff, how's that going? So looking for somebody?
We have multiple vacancies. We're making an offer this week, so hopefully we can fill one of those holes. I'll go fast. You don't have to call me if that's okay. December agenda item updates, Boulder Point, that is the gate and the calming on University Avenue and the other streets. We've been communicating with some neighborhood representatives and are planning to get some more normal counts done early spring, like next week or the week after, and then implement those temporary traffic calming devices that we've talked about with the barrels and the striping and the feedback signs and all that business on Boulder Point and Woodland Drive. And we've been in communication with both neighborhoods. Yep. City Council update in June, hopefully. I haven't heard about it in a while, but I expect that's still going. Some of you that have been around for a while, we had installed kind of a creative Butler Avenue reduced speed zone and raced to get that in place by August of 2020. And just here in the last week or two, finally got to see that it actually worked. So that's pretty cool. There's the link for the commission recordings, which hopefully you all have been able to find if you've been looking for things. And here's the next meeting. We expect to have some updated count information so we can revisit Boulder Point, and that would also be the opportunity to talk about the gate because they're intimately tied. Woodland Drive, Country Club, we have not picked up those counts yet, but you'll remember we talked to that neighborhood, I think, in February. Potentially ADOT Milton Road and 180 CMP, or one or the other, could be ready for some discussion. And maybe, Martin, in June, we'll be ready with the public comment period for the ATMP. It may be a little bit after that. We'll just see how things play out. Saving your battery.
8%. All right. Well, thank you. Commissioners, anything else? All right. I appreciate your time. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
All right.
Just discussion.
Okay.
I just want to thank all of you for being so involved on the Transportation Commission. Thank you on behalf of the whole council.
Well, thank you for participating in these, Councilmember McCarthy. It's wonderful to have you here and your contribution, and we really appreciate your involvement with us.
Well, and I learn a lot.
All right. All right. So all those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
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 Probably no opposed. Nope. Have a wonderful evening, everybody. Thank you, Jeff, Martin, staff. See you soon.
Good night,
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.